I think from a partner perspective, you need to know you need to have a local network and understand who the best executives and entrepreneurs are. You also need to know how to make money. I think it's very good. Typically, new firms, startup, new venture capital firms, they have two partners. One is very connected and knows an area well, and the other has been successful in making money before. Venture capital is a very, it's much harder than I thought it was going to be from the outside. It's kind of like this fun thing that you pick up pretty quickly. It's very difficult. There are about 6 or 7 dimensions of competence. You're always learning, you're always getting better, you're always making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. But I think those are two of the things that I would seek out. Other questions? Yeah. It's a very good question. I think there are a lot of different sectors that one can invest in venture capital, and they have different profiles of exits. One sector that actually has continued to have that profile in really all parts of the globe is the internet. Some of the internet successes in Latin America have been astonishingly big. Mercado Libre, which is an Endeavor company, is just a monster success. I think some of the other internet companies that have come through the ISPs, I have a lot of confidence in, should be very big companies. So in a sector where you can see big wins of that size, I think it's still good to play that game. I think to the extent you don't see winners of that size, you have to start being more conservative. And you maybe invest in fewer things, have a higher bar, and get more deeply involved in the companies to make sure they're successful. But even in sectors like the internet, I mean, that's the sector that I invest in, and it's not a strategy of investing in a whole bunch of things and just hoping a few will work. I work so hard at every single one, and helping them hire a great team, helping them figure out their strategy, and so I don't want any of them to fail. I don't, some of them will. It's the nature of startups, but there's still a ton of hard work that goes into them. And for all those who are getting into investing, and I know there's some former Endeavor entrepreneurs, it's as much work as being an entrepreneur was, except you now, instead of having one company, have many that to be helpful in. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point. For those who couldn't hear the question is, given the opportunity that the Olympics and the World Cup are going to bring to Brazil, are private equity firms trying to invest in Brazilian companies now? And what can Endeavor do to help bring that type of money to Brazil? I think there's a lot that can be done, and in fact, there was a similar theme around China and the Olympics. We have an investment fund in China, and you have to be a little bit careful that you don't invest in something that's just very short term, but what it generally does is it expands demand, and it contracts after the event, but it still remains at a higher level in many sectors, and it often leads to the sort of accelerated development of the sector, so that, say, for a company like Biruta, if you guys have all of the hot campaigns for the Olympics, you will be the company that everybody knows about in Brazil. So it's a great opportunity to sort of set yourself as a leader in the market. I haven't heard that story enough in the United States, and I think actually Endeavor can very much help communicate that to investors in the United States and elsewhere, because I think there's a big opportunity. Yeah. Yeah. How do you find an investor to go to the USA? This is a great question, and one that comes up a lot in Endeavor discussions. So I'd answer it in two parts. The first is, I'd say most investors will invest in your core company, and not just your company on the basis of a potential expansion into the United States. In venture capital, as opposed to private equity, but to some extent private equity as well, we won't invest in a company unless we have people on the ground in that country, because it's a local business. You have to be there all the time to help the company. And so when there are companies where we don't have partners on the ground, which is the US, India, and China, we just, unfortunately, we can't be helpful. I'll try to be helpful as a friend to connect them to customers and executives in the United States. But it's very hard to say to a venture capital firm, invest in us and help us move to the United States if they don't have a person on the ground. Private equity firms are a bit different because it's a later stage of development. They don't have to be there as often. So for a private equity firm, that could be important, but the expansion to the United States has to be both credible and big. There are a lot of companies who would love to expand to the United States, and they don't really have a credible value proposition against the local competitors. Or if they do, it's not going to move the needle enough to be of interest to a new investor. But if the move to the United States is both credible and big, I think certainly in private equity, you can find someone to help you do that. And a good rule of thumb, if you're looking for an investor of any kind, is do a search on Google. There's a lot of venture capital and private equity databases. Find people who have been successful investing in companies like yours, because they'll probably like you. You know, if you find someone who's made some successful Latin American internet investments, or POS system investments, or POS system investments elsewhere, they're going to have a positive predisposition toward you, and if you find the actual partner who worked on those investments, they generally will be very open. Any other questions? Yeah. So that's a really great question. So for those who couldn't hear it, is why isn't there an Endeavor fund to invest in all these great Endeavor companies? This is a question that we have thought about for 10 years and really thought deeply about and talked to a lot of different people about. And it's actually one where I think there's some new ideas on the horizon, but I'd mention a few principles. First of all, I think whoever invested in an Endeavor fund would probably do very well. If you look historically at how well Endeavor companies have done, the search and selection is one of the things that Endeavor as a global organization does best. And on the whole, there are a number of ways you could cut the cake. You could say all Endeavor companies that get outside funding or all Endeavor companies that are selected. But on the whole, I think that would be a fund that makes money. So then the question is, well, okay, so why not do it? You've got some great connections on the local boards, on the global board. Why not just pull the money together and do it? The primary reason there's been a hesitation to do it, despite a desire to help Endeavor entrepreneurs and clearly a way to make money, is one of the objectives of Endeavor is to help catalyze local capital markets. And if we were to start our own fund, we would be potentially crowding out some of that investment. Because as a new venture capital fund in Brazil, I wouldn't want to compete against Endeavor. They've got all the advantages. They've got all the connections. If an entrepreneur says, an Endeavor entrepreneur says, okay, I have a choice. I can take money from Nick's new Brazilian venture fund, or I can take money from the Endeavor fund. Boy, these Endeavor people are pretty connected, and look who they've got on their board, and look at all the other entrepreneurs. It'd be hard to compete. And so we may end up crowding out some of the investors that we'd like to bring in, and thereby sort of reducing our chances of helping to achieve that objective. Our objective is really to try to help bring investors in, and so that in 5 years, people will be fighting over you guys. It'll be like the US. There'll be too much venture capital, and you'll have your choice. You'll be the prettiest girl at the prom, and there'll be a lot of choices. But I think we can get in the way of that if we launch our own fund.